I'm going to begin with the passage of Scripture, our text. It is Matthew chapter 27, and I'm going to begin reading in verse 31, and I'm reading out of the New King James this morning. And while you're turning there, I'm going to go ahead and get started. It said, "And when they had mocked him, they took the robe off him, put his own clothes on him, and led him away to be crucified." Verse 32. "Now as they came out, they found a man of Cyrene, Simon by name, and they compelled him to bear his cross, his being Jesus. When they had come to the place called Golgotha, that is to say, the place of the skull, they gave him sour wine mingled with gall to drink. But when he had tasted it, he would not drink. And then they crucified him. They divided his garments, casting lots, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by the prophet. They divided my garments among them. And for my clothing they cast lots, and sitting down they kept watch over him. And they put up over his head the accusation written against him, 'This is the King of the Jews.' Then two robbers were crucified with him, one on the right hand and one on the left hand. And those who passed by blasphemed him, wagging their heads and saying, 'You who destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself. If you are the Son of God, come down from the cross.' Likewise the chief priests also, mocking with the scribes and others, said, 'He saved others. Himself he cannot save. If he is the King of Israel, let him now come down from the cross, and we will believe him. He trusted in God, let him deliver him now if you will have him. For he said, I am the Son of God.' Even the robbers who were crucified with him reviled him with the same thing. Now from the 6th hour into the 9th hour there was darkness over all the land, and about the 9th hour Jesus cried out with a loud voice, saying, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. That is to say, my God, why have you forsaken me? And some of those who stood there, when they heard that, said, The man is calling for Elijah. Immediately one of them ran out, grabbed a sponge, filled it with sour wine, put it on a reed, and offered it to him to drink. And the rest said, Let him alone. Let us see if Elijah will come to save him. And Jesus cried out again with a loud voice and yielded up his spirit." Have you guys ever been numb? We had more snow this year than we've had in a long time. And if you were outside very often, you probably started to experience some numbness. I can remember when I was younger, I say a kid, some people come up to me after the service and say, Pastor, you're still a kid. But when I was a younger kid, I can remember 1993, I would have been 5, 6 years old. We had a snow. And it's funny because we always called it a good snow in 93. I moved to Tennessee and I heard Lottie refer to it as the blizzard of 93. I was like, oh my. We didn't have a fancy term for it. But I can remember I grew up on a college campus. And so there were a couple dormitories, gymnasium, a cafeteria, a library, an administration building, and houses and different adult housing and so on all around. And so the campus was kind of spread out. It's not just really confined. We're in the country. And we're in eastern Kentucky, so there are hills everywhere, and there are some awesome places to go sledding. And I can remember in 1993 when it started to snow, Gene Light would always hook up the Massey Ferguson tractor and put a snowplow on the back, and he would keep all the roads clear, except in 93 it snowed fast enough where he couldn't maintain the roads quick enough, and the hill that led up to my house from the college iced over. And when I say it iced over, I mean it wasn't like a little bit, it was like prime sledding iced over. I mean, if you've been to the college, you can kind of visualize this. There's a white pump house up, right as you go up the hill. And we would start up at this pump house, and we'd come down the hill, and the hill's probably that steep, okay? It's pavement, but it had probably 3 inches of ice. And back in the day, there was a chapel right at the edge of the campus before you dropped off the hill, kind of a cliff, okay? You consider it a cliff anyway, it's probably that steep. And so we would go, and we would start at this pump house, and I would hop on my runner, and I would go probably a couple football fields flying down this ice, and I would have to stop before I went off the edge of this hill. I mean, we would bail and slide about 10 feet or 15 feet on the snow. I mean, it was a blast. There was about 15 of us campus kids, and the parents, it was such good sledding weather that they actually joined us for once. And our parents were on the hills with us, and we did it all day. And we would go until we couldn't take it any longer. We'd go inside the gymnasium. It had the old heaters on the wall, the gas heaters. They'd suck in air out the top and kick it out the bottom. We'd take off our shoes and put our shoes facing the heat, as it blew out. We'd put our socks and our gloves, and we'd spend an hour playing basketball. We'd thaw out. The clothes would thaw out. We'd put them back on, and they were still kind of wet and cold, but we didn't care because it was snowing outside. We'd go back out, and we would do it again. We'd come back in the gym. We'd go back out. Day after day after day. And it seemed like after 3 days of that, I was completely frozen. I can remember, you hop in bed, and as a kid, I was in shorts and a t-shirt. And my feet, I couldn't feel my feet. And then I'd accidentally bump one of my toes against my leg. And it was like, oh, man. It was cold. We were frozen. I was numb. I couldn't feel anything. Have you ever felt numb? This morning, we're actually celebrating Passion Week, which is the week that you all know Jesus was crucified. Good Friday is this week. And we're in the Easter season, and we're going to be celebrating that, and I'm excited about it. And it's hard to believe it's been 2015 years or so since Christ was crucified. Sometimes I grow numb to the crucifixion of Christ. I don't know what it is, but when I read the crucifixion of Christ, I don't know if it's overexposure. I don't know if I just don't like to take the gruesomeness of the story. I don't know why it is, but sometimes I grow numb to the story of Jesus Christ. And it seems like from his riding in Jerusalem on a donkey in Palm Sunday, this is Palm Sunday, all the way to the crucifixion, it's like I want to tune that part out and I want to jump straight to Easter. There's just something about the crucifixion that makes me grow numb, and it's almost like I don't feel the cost of the cross. I don't think about the fact that for 3 years, Jesus knew that his ultimate destiny was to die on Golgotha's hill. Think about that. Some of you have had surgery, and you told me how much anxiety that's caused you leading into the surgery. Can you imagine for 3 years knowing where you're headed? For 3 years, he poured into his disciples, and even at the end, they misunderstood him. They said, God, are you going to restore your kingdom now to Israel? He was misunderstood. Not only that, he was betrayed by one of his own disciples, Judas Iscariot, who bought 33 pieces of silver for the Son of God. I think about how he was abandoned by his disciples in his hour of need. And if you go back and you read John, in John chapter 17, the high priestly prayer and the different accounts in the Gospels, Jesus said, can you guys just pray with me? I really need you right now. He goes off and prays, comes back, and what are they doing? They're fast asleep. He wakes them up and says, listen, I need you to pray with me. He goes back and prays, come back, and they're fast asleep. There's something, I'm numbed by the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. I'm numbed by the fact that he was arrested like a criminal. I'm numbed by the fact that he was put on trial as if he were a sinner, the only one that wasn't a sinner. He was passed around between Pilate and Herod like he was a joke. He was whipped. He was slapped. I was reading this morning the different account of how he was scourged, and they put the crown of thorns in his head. They got a reed and they smashed those thorns into his head. And we're not talking rose thorns. I mean, these were huge spikes. I'm numb to the crucifixion. I'm numb to the fact that he was ridiculed and mocked and humiliated. He was stripped naked. They put a royal robe on him as a big joke. They gambled to see who would take his clothing. And then he was crucified on the cross. See, I don't do it on purpose, and I don't think that any of us do, but sometimes it's easy to just skip this week and jump straight to Easter. We're numb by the fact that Christ suffered this kind of a gruesome death. And I'm going to challenge you, don't skip Good Friday. Don't skip this season. Don't tune it out. I'm going to tell you why the cross, more than any other event in human history, shows us the heart of God. It's difficult to accept. It's difficult to linger and to dwell on the cross. It's like I can take it for a little bit, but man, I've got to move on now. It's hard to accept, but the cross, more than any other event in human history, reveals to us the heart of God. Some mysteries are so deep and so profound, they can only be understood by looking at the cross. This morning, I want to talk to you about some things that we can learn about the heart of God from looking into the cross. The first thing we can learn is the love of God. Think about it. The cross of Jesus Christ shows us God's love. I once heard a quote, and I've probably heard a million songs that had this theme line, it wasn't nails that held him to the cross, it was love. And that's the truth. Jesus could have come down, and even as they were mocking, they were saying, if you saved others, save yourself. If you're the Son of God, come off the cross. Christ could have come off the cross if he had chosen to, but love compelled him. John 3:16, and we all know it. For God so loved that he gave his only begotten Son. It was love that motivated Christ. And God could talk about love, and he could tell the people, I have loved you with an everlasting love. In fact, he did in Malachi. He said, I have loved you with an everlasting love. And he said, you know your response to me? How have you loved us? The people would say, prove it. We haven't seen a tangible demonstration of your love. The cross of Jesus Christ was God's tangible demonstration of his love. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. And think about this. He wasn't giving his Son to a bunch of people that deserved it. It says in Romans chapter 5, verses 7 and 8, many of you know this verse as well. For very rarely, will anyone die for a righteous person. Though for a good person some might possibly dare to die. But God demonstrates his love for us in this. While we were still God's enemies, while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. What can we learn about the cross? Why is it important for us to linger and to meditate and to dwell on the cross? Because the cross of Jesus Christ shows us God's love. Think about it. He was hanging on the cross. There are 7 sayings from the cross that Jesus, that are recorded in Scripture, and one of them is, Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. This blows my mind apart. These people had put him on the cross. He's the only person in the world that is not guilty of sin. And he's being treated like the worst of sinners. He's nailed to the cross. And while he's the enemies, the people that were making fun of him. I mean, it's one thing to, maybe forgive somebody when they don't know something. But these guys were talking trash. They're saying, hey, if you're God, why don't you come off the cross? Hey, maybe he'll call on somebody to come and save him. And he said, God, forgive these people. They don't even know what they're doing. The cross reveals to us God's love. I can remember I was in a prayer meeting, and Cheyenne was probably there. I'm not sure if she had met Justin at this time or not. Maybe they had, but it was a prayer meeting, and Jim Nelson led it. And Jim started prayer meetings in chapel. It was on Friday night at 10 o'clock, and the prayer meetings went from 10 to 12 o'clock at night. And he actually had wanted to do it from 12 o'clock to 2 o'clock in the morning. And my dad said, Jim, I want to be a part of this. And there ain't no way I'm going to be up till 2 praying. He said, I'll be sleeping and snoring. And so they moved it back to 10 o'clock. And we were in the process of building the chapel. It was an auditorium. It'd seat maybe 450. Had a balcony up top too. And I can remember Jim, it was nothing but plywood. And they had been drywalling. And so there's that fine dust all over the floor. And we unrolled a carpet on it. And he would sit kind of Indian style and open up his Bible and usually share a short devo with us. And then we'd begin to pray. I can remember I loved to play basketball on Fridays were my basketball night, but God would, sometimes he'd say you need exercise, and more often than not he'd say you need prayer. And I heard some people laughing, that's all right. I can remember I went to one of these prayer meetings one time, and I just said, God, I feel like I'm distanced from you. You guys ever felt dry? I said, I just feel like there's a barrier between us right now. Can you help me out? Can you break through this barrier? And I was praying, and I was so desperate, I got down on my face. And I wasn't on the rug. I was breathing in this drywall dust, and probably my nose is running, all kinds of stuff. And I was just praying flat. God, you've got to reveal yourself to me. God, I want to know you more. I want to understand you more. I want to love you more. And I will never forget. It was, there are God moments in our life where we sense God's presence. And there are times like this morning where we sense God's presence, but there was something about this. It was almost like nobody else was in the world for just a moment. And I was stretched out before God, and you know what God brought to my mind? He brought the cross of Jesus Christ. And in that moment, I thought of the words when Jesus said, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? And for the first time, I realized the primary pain that Christ suffered on the cross wasn't physical. It was when the God that he was close to, a part of the Godhead for all eternity, turned his face away because of the sin of his Son. Jesus fell away, and I thought, what pain. And I began to understand the love of God. Folks, it's wonderful to celebrate Easter, and man, we're going to do it up, and I'm excited. I'm going to get pumped up, and I'm going to get jazzed, because the resurrection symbolizes life to the believer. But if we skip over the cross, if we allow ourselves to grow numb, we will not understand the love of God. The cross, more than any other act in history, reveals and shows us the love of God. Second thing that the cross shows us the holiness of God. The cross reveals to us God's holiness. The cross is God's answer to the problem of sin. If it took Christ's life to answer that problem, then sin is a big problem. Sometimes I think that we can sort of in our minds begin to justify what we do in life. And sometimes maybe if we're not careful, we can justify habits or behaviors. But when we look at the cross, we realize afresh, my sin cost God's Son his very life. The cross reminds us of God's holiness. One of the reasons we must not allow ourselves to grow numb to the cross is so that we will never lose our sense of God's holiness and the seriousness of sin. When Isaiah was in God's presence, you guys remember in the Old Testament, it said Isaiah became undone. And he said, oh man, I'm a sinner. Compared to God's holiness, we realize our inferiority. We realize our insecurities are realized as we stand in the presence of God. And when we stand before the cross, we realize that God is a holy God. When I was in high school, I was going through a stage of rebellion. And I share this not to brag, because I wish I could take that back. There are scars on my heart today that I will never be able to fix. God's grace has covered them. He's forgiven me, but there are things in my past. And I can remember when I was in high school, I was rebelling against God, and I just kind of as a side note, you know, often when teenagers rebel against God, if their parent is a godly person, they rebel against their parents too. Because their parents are authority structures that God has placed in their life. And I was rebelling against my parents, and I can remember my dad, I didn't care, you know, he would talk to me about God and his love, and I was just kind of like, yeah, that's great, Dad. I'm tired of this, let's move on. And that was my attitude. I was flippant. It was interesting. I wasn't really like, I wouldn't lie to my parents. I just didn't care about God. I didn't care that my parents were brokenhearted. And I can remember, it wasn't until my dad began to fast for me that I really started to feel conviction. My dad began to fast for me. He fasted on nothing but liquids for 40 days. Have you guys ever skipped a meal? You know what I'm saying? Like, that's pretty intense when you skip a whole day. Fasting a day is serious. My brother, I told you this dating, he fasted for, I don't know if it was a week or 3 days, but he said at the end he was dreaming about food, and he would wake up salivating, and the food was gone. He said, I was so depressed. He said he dreamt of a giant goldfish one night. You know, dating's pretty funny because, you know, you can see that. My dad fasted for 40 days. And God began to put me under conviction. Because see, I was making mistakes in my life. They weren't mistakes. I was sinning in my life, and I didn't care until I saw that my sin was hurting somebody else. And when we look at the cross, when we survey the wondrous cross on which the Prince of Glory died, everything else falls into the background. We realize God's holiness and our sinfulness. Folks, don't grow numb to the cross. Don't miss out on the holiness of God. It's that holiness that motivates us to live pure lives. God said, be holy, for I am holy. What else does the cross teach us? The cross teaches us God's forgiveness. Isn't that beautiful? The cross shows us God's forgiveness. It's a picture of God. I'm an image-oriented guy. And I don't know why, but when I was a kid, I got this idea that at Judgment Day, and it says that we're going to give an account for all the things that we've done, okay? As a kid, I was terrified of Judgment Day. Now, that may be pretty normal, but I'll tell you what scared me about Judgment Day. I read somewhere, I heard a preacher probably trying to get people to the altar. He's like, if you have any sin in your life, everybody in the world is going to know it at Judgment Day. And I can remember I was like, oh my goodness, my parents are going to kill me when I get to Judgment Day and I find out all the... I mean, I'm like a kid. What? I've done like... Maybe I've told my mom a lie or didn't pick up my clothes for chores. I don't know. But I was just terrified. Oh man, every sin is going to be revealed. And I was so terrified as a kid. And I lived with guilt, and I lived with shame, and I lived with this sense of hopelessness. Because I thought no matter what I had done, even if I'd asked God to forgive me, everybody was going to still know what a terrible person I was. And then I found this verse. Listen to this. Micah 7, verse 19. He will turn again. This is he being God. He will have compassion on us. He will subdue our iniquities, which is another word for sins. And thou wilt cast all their sins into the depth of the sea. God says that he's going to forgive our sins and cast them away. He's not going to remember them anymore. And I thought of that, guys, the forgiveness of Jesus Christ. When we look at the cross, it's wonderful to celebrate Easter because Easter represents life. But don't grow numb. Don't stop feeling. Don't stop looking at the cross, because the cross helps us understand God's forgiveness for us. Not only does it help us understand God's forgiveness, it helps us experience and understand God's purpose for us as believers. Ephesians chapter 2, verse 10, for you are created, Christ Jesus, for good works. It says you are God's workmanship. Did you know that God created you for a purpose? Listen, I think we've been sold a bill of goods, and we've been had. A lot of people in the church, they think that Jesus died on the cross only for forgiveness. God created you for good works, that other people would see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven. When we look at the cross of Jesus Christ, it gives us meaning. It gives us purpose. You know, it was no accident that in his last hours on earth, what did Jesus do with his disciples? He gave them a ritual. He said, take, eat this bread, it's my body. Drink this wine, it's the blood. And do this as often as you meet. He challenged them to later on, do this. Every time you gather together and you celebrate, remember the sacrifice that Christ made for you. I think it was intentional. God wanted us to linger on the cross. He wants us to remember the cross because it gives us purpose. And finally, the cross of Jesus Christ, and one of my favorite things, it fills us with awe. You know, the cross, I mean, there's nothing, I don't know if awesomeness is a word. I mean, I'm sure it is because it'd have to be a noun for awesome, or, you know, but anyways, the awesomeness of God. Okay, I don't know if it works or not, but we're going to go with it. The cross of Jesus Christ, it fills us with wonder. Hey, Ravi Zacharias, it's one of my favorite preachers. If you've never heard of him, YouTube him, Google him. He's a great guy. He's a Christian apologist. And he talks in like philosophical language. You can't understand what he's saying half the time. But then he gives awesome stories. He's like this masterful storyteller. And Ravi Zacharias, he's Indian. And so he's got this Indian kind of British accent. Not like the really strong Indian, not tech support Indian like, you know. But he's got a British accent. And Ravi Zacharias, he tells this story. And I remember I actually used it when I graduated from college as my valedictorian speech. And Ravi used this story. He said, I've got 3 kids, and one's 5, one's 3, and one was 1. And this was at the time, okay? And he said, and you know my kids, he said, if I set my 5-year-old down, and I told them, he said, if I sat them down and I told them a story about a green dragon outside, he said, I would talk, and I would talk, and I would talk, but when I got to the moment where I said green dragon, the 5-year-old would light up. Because that captured their imagination. He said, if I talked to my 3-year-old, and I talked about how, Jimmy heard a noise, telling the story. Jimmy heard a noise, and he was in the house, and he was in front of a fireplace, and he went to the door, and he reached to open the door. He said, when I described it, the suspense, at 3 years old, talking about opening the door, fired the imagination of my 3-year-old girl. He said, then I had a 1-year-old girl, or it was a 2-year-old, I think. He said, when I told her this story, all I had to do was say that someone was sitting in a chair, and they heard a noise. And that would fire her imagination. And he said, so it is in life. The older we get, the more it takes to maintain our sense of awe and wonder. The older we get, the more mature we get, the more of life we experience, the more it takes to maintain. And he said there is only one thing in life that is able to maintain your sense of awe and wonder, and that is God himself. Everything else in life, the shiny turns dull, the new gets old. It was funny, I was looking at cars, I was with Jerry, and sorry Justin, I was looking at Justin's Ford pickup truck, and I said, this is a nice truck. You know, like, what year is it? 99, I said, in 1999, this was the truck to have. And then I looked out the road and I saw the latest late model Fords going up, and now these are the new ones. Everything in life, it loses its luster. The headlights get foggy, you know what I mean? The rust starts to develop. Everything in life loses its hold on us. Only one thing is able to maintain our sense of wonder, and that is God himself. Don't grow numb to this time of the year. Don't grow numb and just say, man, if we could just skip the cross and get to Easter, we'll be all right. The cross of Jesus Christ helps maintain a sense of wonder. I don't understand elements of the story of the cross. I don't understand when I read about how the veil of the temple was ripped in half. God's presence is with us, and we can go into the Holy of Holies. I don't comprehend that. I don't comprehend how the Godhead that had been together for all eternity, somehow Jesus looked up and said, God, why have you forsaken me? I don't get the rift that must have happened in the Godhead. I'll never comprehend all the prophecies that were filled. I'll never be able to explain how Christ died and rose again. It's a mystery that humbles me and keeps me in awe and wonder of God. Don't skip the cross. Don't jump to Easter. Think about the cross.